Welcome to the Live and Give Show with Dr. Jaime Gonzalez and Dr. Hua Nguyen. Join us as we share our experiences and those of other experts in their fields who've discovered financial security while creating a pathway towards giving back to others.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Live and Give Show. I'm Hua Nguyen.
I'm Jaime Gonzalez.
And I'm Maria Coleman. And today we have a jam-packed episode on finances and money talk. So buckle up, get ready to listen in, and we're going to be sharing some information that you may or may not have heard before, that may or may not be common knowledge, and may or may not be popular. Just remember that throughout this talk, we're going to be sharing from our own experiences and from our own journey. Let's go ahead and get started, guys.
It's going to be a little sensitive, so it's don't get hurt on anything that we say, and some of the stuff that we're going to say it's probably not what you believe in or not what you've been taught. And we've changed quite a bit. So we're not tax professionals, we are not CPAs, we're not financial advisors, but on this show we're going to tell you guys about our experiences and what we know that other people that have been very successful, what they have been doing, because we pay a lot for these masterminds, right? And a lot of big players go into these masterminds, and we talk about money whenever we go in there. It's not, we mentioned this on whenever we were talking about the show, the idea for this show, and money to a lot of people, talking about money is very taboo, like you were saying, you know? So are you excited about the show?
I'm super excited. You know, even though you say it may be sensitive, the whole goal of this episode and the whole show is really utilizing our own experiences and what we've learned that we feel are some nuggets, maybe some different strategies, or at least one strategy, right? There's so many different types of strategies of being able to build wealth, but the money talk, you know, so if we don't, it's kind of like we talk about KPIs, key performance indicators. If you don't measure it and you don't have a pulse on your finances, then it's hard to really improve and have a blueprint and a plan to move the needle forward. And so I really want to utilize some strategies, share some experiences, and hopefully by the end of the show, you'll actually be able to utilize some of the mindset, some of the money strategies for your own situation, wherever you are on your financial journey. And I really would encourage you to ask us questions. This is time that, you know, if you're watching it live with us, please put in the comments. You know, if you have a comment, if you have a question for us, we are more than happy to answer that live on the show. If you're watching this after the fact, still write a comment, and we'll read your comments and we'll answer those. But why don't we start off with let's start back in the beginning of our journey. Let's talk about, you know, when we're living paycheck to paycheck, when we're really in the negative almost, right? Jaime and I personally, graduating from optometry school, I mean, we had $350,000 student loan debt. But I'm going to take you guys even further back before our journey into becoming a doctor. Just started off in the workforce. Like I started at age 10, and each one of us have a very different background of our family upbringing and our mindset around money. So let's talk and start off with mindset about money and your youth and kind of how you started in your first job. Why don't we start you off with that?
So my mindset with money was actually just scarcity. So my parents were each working, you know, very long days. And then we would see them at nighttime, and sometimes they would have two jobs to support the family. Both of my parents worked, but it was all about scarcity. You know, we can't go here because we don't have enough money. We can't do this because, you know, this is very tight. You know, you don't understand money, you know, and like we've all heard it, it's like, money doesn't grow on trees. You know, money is not abundant. You know, money is very hard to get. You have to work really hard to make money. So this is all ingrained since you're understanding, your parents, like at 4, 5, 6 years old. And so I lived with my parents up until college. I graduated college. And so that's a long time. From 4 to 5 years old, it's the same thing. So it's all scarce. It's very scarce, but I had to untrain my brain and my mind. That was not the case. Money is very abundant. Money does grow on trees, and you can get money anywhere. So that was my mindset whenever I was getting a little bit older.
But what helped you make that shift, would you say?
I realized early on that if I keep thinking about how money is very scarce, it's going to be real scarce. I ain't going to make any money. So if what you put your mind in is probably what you're going to get, right? And what you focus on, you'll probably head that direction. And so I started kind of understanding mindset just a little bit after college. And then once I got to optometry school, and then because I was organized whenever I was growing up, but again, it's no one teaches you this. No one's going to tell you, hey, you can get money anywhere. It's very easy to get money. Telling myself, and we talked about it in different episodes, it's like your subconscious mind is very, very powerful. So if you have that ingrained, what you've been taught, even if you're not thinking it, you are thinking it. It's going on in the back of your mind that is going to be very difficult for me to progress in life and make more money. And then we can get on to, we'll probably come back to you, but that continued to change once we started making a little bit more money. So just the mindset was very, very different. How about you, Maria?
So some of my earliest memories about money is actually sitting around the kitchen table where my dad would take a piece of paper, sometimes a napkin, and in his sweet little handwriting, which is, I'm getting emotional here. I didn't expect to do that, but he would just take and jot down what he was making and slowly, line by line, just subtract everything that was going out. And many times there was a lot of month left at the end of the money, right? And so we always lived paycheck to paycheck. And I remember telling myself that I wanted to grow up and get an education so that I could have enough money, and this is very, very important, very key, that I could have enough money for when I needed it and for when I wanted it. I didn't want anything else because I didn't want to be selfish and I didn't want to be greedy. And we'll talk later about how that mindset ended up essentially limiting me. So I definitely agree that mindset plays a big role, but that's definitely one of my earliest memories. And I often go back to that even now as an adult, as we're doing our budget at home and as we're looking at our budget. I always remember that my parents, we lived off of a $20,000 a year income with 4 kids and 2 parents, living in a home where I just treasure. It was called Little Mexico, and it still is referred to as that in Ennis, Texas. But I think that that's important because you learn to make do without. You learn to tell yourself that you don't necessarily need nice things, that you don't necessarily need things that everyone else has. You don't need to go on vacations, things of that sort. And so I think that that slowly contributes to that limiting mindset. I think that that also plays into what we feel like we deserve. So those were some of my earliest memories of money.
Thank you for sharing that, Maria. My earliest money memory was because I was a young entrepreneur. My mom and dad, seeing them work at janitors, and we came to the U.S. at 8.5. So we moved from place to place to place, and they're trying to make ends meet. And my dad had always sacrificed, and he always talked about the American dream of why they fled Vietnam, why they came here in America for opportunities. And my dad became an alcoholic because it was always financial issues. And I remember us moving, we finally made it to New Orleans, seeing their hardship. The conversation was always around how we struggled with money. And so when we came to the New Orleans, and I recently posted my first home being a $3,000 trailer, but that was our first home that we actually bought. But it was our own space. It was the first time we had our own space. We weren't living in one bedroom in a 5, sharing with other 4 or 5 other families. So it was our home, regardless of where it was. But because we had that money conversation, and I saw my dad deteriorate, and he became an alcoholic, he became depressed because he felt like he had failed us, that he came and he didn't live the American dream, right? And so he passed when I was, 12 and a half, 13, but I started working by age 10. So I was always out. My mom had a little convenience store in New Orleans. So I was out there cooking and prepping food. And I always remember my parents, like, regardless of how much money, even though we always struggled with money, they were such giving souls. Like, we always brought in homeless people. They were always feeding people in the neighborhood. They were always such givers. And when my dad passed away, and I was like, we are in the land of opportunity. And it was just such a big driver for me. I was like, you know what? My mom never had an opportunity to go to school because she was a woman in Vietnam. She wasn't even allowed to go to school. And my mom just said, I just want you to, if you can find something where you can have passion and become your own boss, become an entrepreneur, then that's what I would like for you to do. She didn't say you have to become a doctor. She didn't say you have to go to school. She never even had the opportunity. She really didn't have huge, high expectations for me. She was like, I went and got my nails, my license. I joke about when people are like, oh, most Vietnamese do nails. I'm like, well, I am actually licensed as a manicure. I do nails. I have done nails. But but I had such big dreams because I was like, man, my parents have sacrificed so much. My mom was working, easily 80 hours to 100 hours in the restaurant industry. There were no weekends. There were no holidays. There's no summer vacation. I mean, so my concept of money was like, I was a hustler at age 10. Like, I was not just working at the family restaurant business. I was going to school, selling Chinese noodles, selling candy, selling all sorts of stuff. Probably not advised and legal, but that's what I was doing at a young age. I was hustling and trying to find how else can I help my family, especially after my dad passed. My mom was single mom of 3, right? And I was just like, I didn't perceive, my mindset wasn't like, what did I not have? It wasn't even about that, right? It wasn't like, oh, I felt like, well, all the kids have this, or they're dressed nicely, and I'm in, at the thrift store finding, old clothes. My mindset wasn't even about that. I knew that my mindset moving forward, I really focused on like the blessings that we have. And I was going to execute this American dream that my dad's coming to America was not his sacrifice, my parents' sacrifice was not a thing, right? And so that was a huge driver for me. And so when you talk about the mindset involved, because I grew up in that entrepreneurial spirit, I was always looking for ways to make more money, right? When I went to college, I had 3 jobs, right? I was always hustling and making more. Even as a doctor, I would pick up relief work, any ways that I could create extra streams of income. That was kind of my mindset at the beginning. Anything I could sell online, I was doing eBay sales, I was doing anything that you can think of. But I did that at a young age. So when Jaime and I met, he didn't come from the entrepreneurial world. You weren't exposed to that. I was exposed to that because my mom was an entrepreneur, right? So the money conversation is very different in how we build and how we think. But the alignment, but the strategies, more importantly, with our backstory is what we're going to share from that mindset of being able to create more income, but also I call it the wedge. If you can learn the wedge meaning the expense and the income. Most people, the more money you make, the more you spend, right? The secret is how do you work on the expense and budgeting side and continue to build the income side and be creative and increase that wedge. And with that wedge, what do you do with that money to really start building out and building wealth, right? But before we jump to wealth, let's just get out of the hole.
Well, if we may just kind of stay on the mindset part of it, right? Because it's very important. It's very, very difficult to change a mindset if, say, for example, if you're 50 years old, or if you're 30 or 40
Right.
even. But what did you learn, and whenever you were young, that specifically change your mindset? What did you realize or learn that got you to that point. And we heard your story about, but what specifically, a couple of examples or instances that you can maybe tell them out there, what specifically did you actually learn?
So I learned specifically at a very young age budgeting.
Budget. Okay.
Huge. I knew all my numbers,
Mhm.
exactly what I was spending on, and I was never a lavish spender, right? Even till this day, I'm not a lavish spender. So I'm always very careful on what was necessary. And if I wanted to have something that was nice, that I was really valuable for, like for me, I will spend it on experiences. Now, at a young age, I had no vacations and things like that, right? But we did free entertainment. So it was like, okay, what can I do that still can free my mind, but it doesn't cost a lot? Clothes, like how can I have still decent looking clothes, but not have to spend a lot, right? And so I would go, like even when I got out of the thrift store phase, I would still go to like Marshalls, Ross, TJ Maxx, and I'm not afraid to say it, right? That I could still buy nice clothes that were decently priced.
The dollar store.
Or dollar store, right? I would buy gift bags. Till this day, I still buy gift bags for Christmas or birthdays for $1, right? Because those are things where why would I go spend $5 or $7 buying a gift bag that might be a one-time use, where I can easily go and buy, at the dollar store or something like that. And so being able and like going out, we didn't go out to eat a lot. Most of the time, the eating category is probably the biggest bucket for people is eating out. And so we were really good about, obviously, we were in the business, so we knew how to cook very well. But we cooked most of our meals. And even when I started going to work, I always packed my lunch. And that saves a lot of money. And so it doesn't matter if you make 1,000 or 500 a month or 10,000 a month. I think the budgeting aspect, from the day I started working at age 10 to the day that I am now, I still am very aware of how I spend that money and what is worth it. Like even traveling, looking at flights, looking at hotels, right? I always want to find a deal, And so that's on the budget side. On the creative income side,
Why do you always want to find a deal? Do you feel good whenever you do that? Or do you feel accomplished? Or what?
I feel like
Because most people-
it's all perception of value for me, right?
Mhm.
I feel like if I were able to save $200 or $1,000 on one thing, but I can utilize that 200 or 1,000 to help our parents, to help someone else with our philanthropy work. But even it doesn't matter how much, but that to me was more valuable. Right. I was like, if I can save, I don't need, like on a plane, I never felt the need to go first class because I was like, it gets me from point A to point B. So I never felt like having to pay the $1,000 extra was worth it for me. Right. Because I'm like, maybe once or twice I want to do it just to experience it. But for me, I was like, in my mind, that $1,000 or $2,000, I would feel so much better if I could just give that to our parents and help them in need, right? Or if I can donate that to a cause that's more meaningful, right? And so it's just, for me, it filled my heart more. It filled my soul more, right? And so I look at deals till this day, and I feel accomplished. I'm like, oh, that's a great deal. Who doesn't want a great deal, right? And so, we just had this conversation this morning where we're like, well, why do I still it doesn't even matter how much you have in the bank account. Like, why do my habits in that sense? I could show a $25,000 check and feel great and not even worry about it. But if it's a $300 dress, to a charity. But if it's a $300 dress, I'm like, and it's full price, I'm like, I don't know if I want to pay $300 for that, And that's still, till this day, I still feel that. But if that dress was now on sale for half off or something, I'm like, okay, I'll put that dress,
We high five each other.
So that is a strategy though, even till this day, because I was like, I can still have a beautiful trip to Asia or to Florida or wherever our vacation is going to be. And I can still create that experience without having to be top dollars. Right.
Mhm.
And I love doing that. That's why you always like, if all fails, you can be a travel agent, right? Because I love planning trips and, that's a whole nother episode, how you travel like luxury on a budget price, right? but I'm very good at that. And I feel so accomplished. Like, oh, I got this deal. I got this deal. I put it all together, But it is a strategy because if you are aware of it, most people, if we have a lot of money sitting in the bank account, sometimes it could be easy to just be like, oh, don't worry about it. We want this, we'll buy it, right? We want this, we buy it, right? But I think if you plant in advance, like, well, what else can I do with that money? How do I help multiply or utilize it in ways that is more meaningful to you? And whatever you like, there's no judgment, right? If you like certain things and that floats your boat, then that's great, right? But I think you do have to have awareness and a pulse of what your spending is. And I think that's a huge mindset, is being strategic about how you utilize your money and having a great eye on the ball, always have a pulse on that.
I like whenever you said about the wedge, right? Right before the show, I said, you can make more. Say this is your expense right now, and this is how much you're making. But then some earners that are making more money make more, but then they spend more. The wedge is actually the same, and you have that still the same amount of expendable income, right? And it doesn't move. If you make more, the wedge is still moving at the same delta, the same difference, right? You're spending more, you're making more, and then you spend even more, right? And then you don't get to leverage any of that later on down the road by some of whatever else you want to do, right? So I like what you said about budgeting and knowing your numbers, your KPIs. That's very important, and having a plan. So sticking to mindset. So what specifically can you tell them? What about mindset, or what strategy did you learn whenever you were realizing, hey, this is what's been taught to me. What can I do, or how can I change it?
Absolutely. I think finding a solution. So obviously, once you know the problem, the next step is to find a solution. And I'll tell you that came from my childhood, because when we were short on cash and we had that extra month left at the end of the money, my mom was looking for ways to make additional income. It might have been sewing something for someone else, and then they would pay her that amount to tailor a piece of clothing. Or it could have just been, in Spanish, we call them financieras, which if that was something that we just knew. We could go down to the loan place. It was like the payday loan. And to me, it was just something that they knew was fine. They knew that we were going to take a payday loan and then pay that back, and in a month we'd be back. And it's like, it was early leverage, if you will. But at the end of the day, I think that what we were really learning is to make that money go around until you had to buy groceries, until you had to pay rent. And I think for me, it was, and I tell my kids this: you have the problem, but now you find the solution. Don't ever just stay stuck and just throw your hands up in the air and say, woe is me. You have the power to come up with a solution. And I think that that was instrumental in my mindset. Okay, so you get out of high school, what are you going to do? Well, I need to make more money. Who's going to give me more money? I need an education. By getting certified, just looking for ways to make yourself more valuable in the marketplace was huge for me. And that was just one of the ways that I found a solution.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so both
I
of
see
you,
some people joining us. How do we have? We have Martin,
Martin, what's up?
Isonia.
My cousin, oh, what's up?
Hi, thanks for joining us,
And
guys.
Chico Lean, what's up?
Thanks for joining, guys.
There's a question.
You know, there's a question.
What percentage of income should you allocate towards saving if the goal is investing? Thank you for that question, Frank.
So everyone's going to be different, right? We're going to talk about our particular case, right? 20% of what we were making was going to savings, whether the savings 401k, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, a LERP, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate investing. So at least 20% was going straight to investing. Sometimes a little bit more, sometimes maybe a little bit less. But we were allocating a good amount to the investing piece. So You want anything?
I would say we were always a little bit, we have a reserve. We always talk about emergency fund, where you do want to have a separate side amount for at least 3 to 6 months is for emergency fund. But 20%, when we were working for someone else right out of school, it was always about 20% that we allocated towards investing for like 401k and stuff at the time because we were employed by someone else. However, we also, in addition to that 20%, the months that we can, especially because we were doing relief work and picking up extra income, we would actually utilize, because the goal back then was to purchase our own practice. In addition to that 20%, if we had extra, we would do an additional 10, 15% towards putting in for our practice, right? But most people, if you're starting out, I would do a personal financial statement. Really list out where your income, where your expenses are, what your assets, what your liabilities are. If you don't know what a PFS stands for, personal financial statement, I would encourage you to do an inventory. It's a financial report card of where you're standing right now. Then figure out what is the gap of how much extra income after all of your expenses are paid off. Can you allocate 20%? If you can't, you can go down a bit. But if you're able to allocate 20% towards investing, it's all about compound interest and compound that money. You want to put that money to work for you as soon as you can. It's not too late to start, but if you have kids or people in your family, the younger that you can start investing, even if it's a small amount, that money compounds and it multiplies. And age does play a role if you start investing young, because it keeps compounding, right? And so that I would encourage, if you can get up to 20% to put towards savings, great. Now, if you don't, with your normal position, if you're working, whether it's for yourself or someone else, find out what other small thing, maybe one day a week or a few hours a week, what are your skill sets that you can maybe create and bring value to the marketplace. You can tutor someone. You can help counsel someone. You are unique and have a skill set that you think is normal to you, that, trust me, someone would pay you to learn what you know.
What's your superpower?
Right.
That's what we call it, right?
Right.
So, and you can just teach someone your superpower, and that's the value that you don't have to do it every day. You can do it one day out of the week. But both of you guys said, what else can you do from your 9 to 5, Monday through Friday job? And that's what we did. It's what else can you do? What else can you become? How much more can you help your community, us in particular? What else can I do to be more successful, not just for me, but for my community, for my company, to leave a legacy, right? It's going back to the mindset, right? So you guys mentioned really good things. Like for me, it was the grit. It's like the hard work. It was the dedication, because I saw my parents have all of that. You know, they had grit, they had hard work, they had dedication, but they didn't have a little bit more knowledge that was accessible to them to be even more successful, right? And yeah, they were working a lot, but I already had that ingrained inside me, right? So that made it a little bit easier for me to actually change my mindset. And then talked about it from one of our friends a while back. He's the people that grew up poor, just like all three of us. It's like the gift of poverty. That stuck with me. It's been probably 6 years, and it was a gift, right? It was a gift because I learned so much from that. And it doesn't have, you didn't have to be poor, but what else were you given as a gift that you can learn from and you can leverage, right? So for me, was that part of my parents were making my clothes. My mom was making my clothes, my shorts and my shirts. And we were going to the stores that you mentioned earlier. And then you had a little bit of shame along with it. So that was extra motivation for me to change and to be the one. We mentioned this back with like a couple episodes. You got to be the one. You got to be the one that needs to change, that needs to progress, that needs to be the one to have a better community. So you got to have the passion. You got to bring that passion in.
Yeah, I want to touch on something you said because I don't think that I really thought about it since I was a child. And you mentioned the word shame. And the reason I want to mention the word shame is because that shame eventually turns into that necessary. You have to do it, right? For me, the shame came when we would have to shop at garage sales for clothes. And I remember being so embarrassed, and I didn't want people to know that I was in the car while my mom was out there getting clothes. And my mom is so witty, so witty. She said, different from when you ask your friend to borrow a shirt and then you wear that the next week. And I thought, lo and behold, okay, she's right. We would also get donations from the church. The church would show up with bags of clothing, and I'll never forget something. This is another one that pulls at my heartstrings. But I remember getting this beautiful dress, and it was black and it was floral. And then a few years later, I remember being in a photography studio because at the time I was cheering for the local high school. And I remember looking, and there was a family that was all dressed up, and there was a little girl wearing that dress that had been donated to me. And I just remember knowing that, whoa, that was donated, and I just loved that dress. But I think that shame is something that really turns on, and it makes you say, you know what? Today is not the quit day. Today is not the day that I quit. Today is not the day that I throw up my hands and say, woe is me. Everyone here is a victim in one way or another, but we need to figure out how to be victors. And that's something that Dr. Boss speaks a lot about, being the victor. So I love the fact that we're touching so much on mindset because many people want to go straight to the financials, straight to the what are the strategies? How much do I save? How much do I invest? Where do I invest? What is the good stuff? What is the good this and that? And it's like, at the end of the day, what you put into the world is what the world's going to get back to you. And I think knowing how to kind of fend those things off and bring in more of what you like, and then just whatever doesn't serve you, let it go.
I love that. I love that you say that. We spend most of our topic today on mindset, even though the money's about, I know people want to hear straight to how do you make the money, right? But I think that was a good wedge for us to section into our next topic. But that is so fundamental. Like, if the foundation and the mindset about money is not there, it doesn't matter how much you make. It does not matter. 1 million, 10,000, 10 million, right? I think the foundation has to be there, a healthy foundation, because you can only build a healthy financial structure on a healthy foundation. And the mindset is such the root of so many pillars that we'll talk about. It all is from the mindset first, right? But the beauty of it is, even if you don't have the mindset yet, the beauty is you can shift and learn. And that's why we're putting on this show, is because through our own journey of what we've been taught in our own experiences, we have to continually evolve, change, learn from others who are ahead of us, and continually shift that mindset, right? And what's worked and what hasn't worked, right? And sometimes we take something as truth and we'll negate anything else that doesn't fall into what we believe to be true. And I think the importance is to be open-minded, open-hearted, continue to learn, and just, okay, if that doesn't fit your box, that's okay, right? If that doesn't fit your situation, that's okay. Be willing to listen and learn, and then pick for yourself, that's in alignment with where I'm going in my path. But that was a big shift for me, because before, if it didn't fit my box of what my thinking was, I tune them out. No relation, nope, that's not right. That's not true, right? But that's a huge part of the mindset, is being to like, hey, what if, just curiosity, what if that person is actually right? What if I explored it for myself? What if what I always believed is actually not true, right? And that's in all different categories, specifically finances, right? And so I would encourage that step one. Open your mind, open your heart, and just learn, listen. And like we said, we just want to share from our own personal experiences what's worked and what's not. And it may not be for everybody, but we're just sharing golden nuggets, right?
So just kind of going back to like the very basic, right? So education, and to understand someone, say you have a belief, right? And then someone starts speaking that's something, it's completely opposite of what you think. The majority of people are going to block them out. They're going to get upset. They're going to start spitting out what they believe and not really try to understand or empathy, which empathy, if you take it down to the word, it's like understanding the other person, where they're coming from, what they've been educated on that certain subject, but understanding, not feeling sorry for the person, but understanding what they're saying. So if you really want to get educated and learn, you hear what they're saying. It might not be what you believe in, but seeing what their point of view is. And maybe they might be right. Or there might be something that you can utilize from the whole talk, even though you might not agree with them, you might be able to utilize one or two things that make you think, and you can take it to another level, right? And having empathy with the other person, right? And that's what we do. Before, I was not like that, right? Before, I had my point of view, and I did not want to stray away from my point of view, and I have it, solidified. But now it's okay, if someone is telling me financial advice, okay, I'm going to hear them out and try to understand where they're coming from, challenge your belief, and see if you can actually expand and learn what the other person's saying. So I think just especially with finances, because what we've learned is very different than what you have been taught or what other people are saying currently. This is just my belief. Again, you don't have to believe it. Just understand, have empathy on me.
Just hear now.
I think a lot of the financial, say, gurus, or they can be either online or you go to a certain seminar, and I've analyzed a good amount of what they teach, and I try to understand them too. But I think they're trying to keep us in the middle class. It is not to their advantage to everyone be successful. Everyone has to be either low or middle or high class, right? And that's just on the monetary aspect of it, right? But I think that's the case right now. And a lot of people, there might not be understanding what they're actually learning, first of all, but they might not be learning the most optimal, most efficient way to get to a certain point.
I'm going to give you two very specific examples that go against the grain in a bit, but I want Maria to take the next subject and your input before I give you two examples.
Okay. So I think that one of the things that's super important is to look at your own personal situation, look at where you started, look at how far you've come, look at the places where you feel like you've been knocked down, didn't know how you were going to proceed, and then somehow you found that grit and found that resiliency to just keep going. It could have been a setback, a divorce, for example. It could have been you not being able to, in my case, I actually got pregnant before I got married. I was still in college, and that could have been the end for me if that's what I chose to do. But I think that it's important to look at your own personal situation. Dr. Phil has a great quote that says, you can't change what you don't acknowledge. And I think sometimes just that awareness is going to give you so much power to be able to look at a strategy that is being presented and then say, you know what, that meets me where I am right now. I'm going to take it. I'm going to apply it. Or maybe that's too far along the road and I'm not quite ready for that. Another one of my favorite quotes is that when the student is ready, the teacher appears. So sometimes that opportunity is there, but you can't really take advantage of perhaps an investing strategy because you don't have the funds. But then you go back and you look at the funds and you figure out how you can increase that wedge that Dr. Paul talked about. how you can make a little bit more income, or you can look at some of your spending categories and decrease those in an effort to have your money work for you. That was one of the biggest takeaways for me when I joined Black Steel Investment Group, is that yes, it's great to have money sitting somewhere, but what else could it be doing for you? And how can you leverage that? So
Perfect.
So
Yeah.
I need you to fill in a little bit more about your story and how you went from making a certain amount to where you
Yeah.
are. Give them some nuggets.
you want some nuggets. Oh, all right. So this is where the vulnerability aspect, and I know exactly why Dr. Hua called me out on this, because I struggle with this, because sometimes I have the little imposter syndrome. Let me put the imposter syndrome over here. Say, are you qualified to speak on this topic? You grew up in a $6,000 home with parents that were making $20,000 a year. You were at one point on food stamps. When you were pregnant with your first child, you were on welfare. Can you really speak on finances? Of course I can, and let me tell you why. So, as I mentioned, I grew up with that mindset, with that mentality that said, I want enough for when I want it and enough for when I need it, but no more. And for a long time, that's exactly where I lived, in that moment of not having enough and just barely getting by. However, I did tell myself that I needed to find a solution. For me, the solution was higher education. After graduating from my undergrad, I went to work for local government, where I was making about $30,000 a year as a senior secretary as a degreed person. At that point, I had a young son, and I remember my boss at the time, he's like, Maria, you need to go back and get your master's. Again, talking to someone who already has student loan debt, who's making $30,000 a year, who has a young baby at home, and a marriage that's on the rocks. How am I going to go do that? But he saw potential in me. And I think that is so key. If you see some potential in someone else, mention that, because sometimes we fail to see it in ourselves. If you have someone that's pouring into you, take that as a compliment and just say thank you. Sometimes thank you is very hard to say because you don't believe it yourself. So I went back. I got my MBA. I was working full time and I was going to school part time. And I remember friends at the time, they were saying, how are you doing that? And honestly, I couldn't tell you, because I was taking one day at a time. I was putting one foot in front of the other. If I didn't eat until 10 o'clock at night, I just didn't eat until 10 o'clock at night. I had awesome in-laws and my now ex-husband who was taking care of my child. And so that allowed me that freedom to be able to do that. And yes, I did miss a lot of time with my son, but he now knows exactly why I made those sacrifices. And I'll tell you that this instance, when I went from making $30,000 a year to making $70,000 a year in a matter of years, like 2 years, was a big mind shift change for me, because I didn't believe that I could do that. I remember when I got my MBA, there was a company that was starting to hire and they were interviewing people. I didn't have the qualifications, and they needed telecommunications experience. I had none. They needed consulting experience. I had none. I had senior secretary experience for a commissioner's court at the time, and I had my MBA, and that's all that I had. And they were offering me $68,000 a year. That's way more than what I was making. But in my head, I said, I want to get to 70. I'm not sure how I'm going to get to 70, but I felt like that was me making it. And I remember I went back to the recruiter and I said, you know what? My number is 70. And she said, I'm sorry, we can't do that. And I said, give me a $2,000 sign on bonus. If in 1 year I don't exceed your expectations, I'll give you your money back. And that was a money back guarantee that I sat with, and I was able to make 70K. And I remember thinking, man, people are making that. And I was at the lower end because I was just a consultant in the telecommunication industry. Remember, I had no experience in that. But I think sometimes our limiting beliefs don't allow us to take that step because we feel like we're not qualified. You won't know if you don't try. How do you know you're going to fail? That's from a previous episode. We encourage you to go back and listen to that. But I think that from there, it just allowed me to then further create an additional plan. And Jaime's going to talk about this in a little bit, so I'm going to say that for you. But I went from making 70 to making a goal of I wanted to make 6 figures. That was my number. If I could make 6 figures, I would just have succeeded in life. That was my goal. And then when you start to make 6 figures and you hang out with people that make 6 figures, you're like, wait a minute, there's more. right? And so I think that just continuing to believe in myself, continuing to add to my skill set. Maybe again, that's a certification. Now with YouTube University, we love YouTube University around here. But I went back and got a second master's. I could have gotten a doctorate, but I told myself that I didn't want to be overqualified. I wanted to be able to use my degrees as chess pieces. You need an MBA? I got it. You need somebody in IT management? I got it. You need international business? I got it. What else do you need? If I don't have it, I'll go out and get it. And that was my mindset. And that's, I think, how I'm able to sit at this wonderful table with these great guys.
No, and then another thing as employers for a lot of employees, if you say what you're going to do and you do it, that says a lot about you because most people don't do that.
Mhm.
That's just reality, right? If you say money back guarantee and then you do it and you come through, it's like, why would I not invest in you for the company, right? That just instant credibility right there and then.
That is so powerful, Maria. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing and being so authentic. And we're so proud of you. You deserve to be in this seat. People who are listening in on this are going to get so many nuggets, and just you sharing your journey and your drive and that mindset shift that you knew you deserved it. But part of that big gap is sometimes believing that we deserve it, believing that there's more, that I deserve more, that you deserve more, right? And for you to make that shift and be surrounded, and you said a pivotal comment about being surrounded by others who were making more, who you knew these are the skill sets and what you had to do. What else do you need to do, and who else did you need to become to get to the next milestone? That's so much value you're sharing. So thank you. Thank you. But I'm very grateful that we always start our show being just very raw and real. And when you said today's conversation and topic is going to be hard for me because of imposter syndrome, I was like, oh my God, do you not know your journey of how much value you deserve a seat at this table, because so much that you have done in your own journey. And it's no comparison, right? It's no competition, but we all have learned something in our financial journey that you can share with others. And you are a phenomenal person. And we're so proud to have you on board.
Thank you, guys.
How about you want to share one of your examples?
I'm going to share the two examples of golden nuggets of against the grain. Now, this conversation might get a little bit of not people agreeing, but this again is just personal experience and a strategy.
I'll have empathy on you.
Strategy that I would say, I honestly believe these two strategies alone really helped us in our personal financial journey. So number one, when we talk about owning a home. And so when Jaime and I first graduated, and we were by then, even though we had a lot of debt, we were doctors. We had six-figure incomes. And then by that time, the biggest expense category for most people is housing. If you break down your expense category, more than likely most people's highest expense category is going to be your home. So Jaime and I continued living in a one-bedroom apartment by choice, right? Because we knew we were working on the wedge, right? And we knew that was going to be the biggest. I was like, if we could do a few years of like really saving on how we lived and not change, we were living in a one-bedroom apartment close to our workplace. And that was fine, right? That was one area. We did eventually buy our first home, but it was when you meet with a broker and they ask you what's your income and what kind of house bucket and how much can you afford, we were buying our first home way below what we could afford. Our first home was $135,000 and 0% down. This was before this 2008 and all this. 0% down, still low interest. So that was a smart decision for us to be able to go ahead and buy our first home at that point. So we saved a ton of money living in an apartment and then living at that home until our next milestone. But just imagine, that was really low amount. In our apartment, we probably spent $500 or $600. When we bought our home, we probably got to about $700 or $800 a month. And at this point, we weren't really our lavish lifestyle. We didn't have a lavish lifestyle. And the biggest bucket being your home and housing costs, we kept that very low. The second one that most people immediately talk about is student loan debt. Like, oh my gosh, you have all the student loan debt. You want to pay that down as fast as you can. And everybody we talked to really advised us to pay off our debt. But our long-term goal, we knew we wanted to be practice owners. We knew we wanted to have the money to purchase our own practice. Now, interest rates have changed now, but back then, we were able to secure 30 years at 2.2% interest. There's nobody who's going to lend us money for our practice or for anything else lower than 2.2%. So we were in no rush to pay off our student loan debt. Again, we paid the minimum for our student loan debt so that we can, again, have more income and money so that we could put towards investing, so we could put towards our goal of buying our own practice, right? But those two strategies alone, I think, were a big area if you're talking about expenses. Could we have paid our debt down, especially our student loan down, a lot faster? Absolutely. Could we have bought a fancier, nicer home? Absolutely. I'll throw in a bonus, the third one. Okay, I forgot I was supposed to take a picture and post it on Facebook, which I will soon. He drives a 2004 Toyota Sequoia.
20 years.
We made it. So again, it's a car that he's already paid off by this time. And it's been a phenomenal car. Low
Like 16 years
maintenance.
ago.
Yeah. We made our 20-year anniversary. But again, cars we knew are a depreciation. They don't appreciate, right? Cars are something that he drives a 2004. I drive a 2008 till this day still, right? But again, that was a big area of a bucket of expense that, again, we didn't have to spend on. We got to point A to point B. Our cars were running fine. We were not trying to stay up with the Joneses because we had a bigger dream and vision down the line. Now, don't get me wrong. I like nice things, right? I like fancy things. But in our blueprint of planning of where we wanted to put our money to work, I knew we had to sacrifice on the front end. And the extra money, if we can utilize that for family vacations, travel, cheap travels and stuff, I'd rather spend that money there to create experiences. And that was kind of where we valued it, right? But those, I said two, but those three were really big areas that we were able to save a lot of money. But again, people were like, you should get a nicer home, or why don't you buy a new car? Like, why are you still letting Jaime drive a 20-year-old car? Like, he can buy whatever he wants. But it wasn't because it's just a different mindset. But that was part of the financial planning. And Jaime and I never really had lavish. There are certain things we really like, right? But there are areas where we can skip and get deals on other areas till this day where we can hey, let's put that money to work otherwise. And when we talk about the increasing the wedge, the bigger we increase the wedge, the more we were able to put money towards investing. And the more the investment category grew and more assets. And, we always talk about, you can buy all the nice things you want. But once you have money coming from your assets, then you can buy your nice toys, right? I said, you can always buy a nice home. You can always buy a fancy car. You can always buy all the lifestyle, all these nice things that we all want. We can all have it, but you have to have a financial foundation and a blueprint to get there where you're not just making that money and then not having other assets where money's just multiple streams of money coming in where you can do that, right? And so I think that's important to start planning in advance.
But you wouldn't have able to do that if you would be paying down your loan.
Right.
So, or if you would have gotten a bigger house. So you need a leverage, right? Like we talked
Right.
about. If we were paying down our loan, our 300, how much was it? 370 or 350,000 total. Our loan, and I was joking with them earlier. I was like, it was a 30-year loan. I want another 30 years. It's like, if they can give me another 30 years, I'll sign up right now at 2.25 or 2.5 or whatever I can get it at. But if we want to leverage that loan, we wouldn't have been able to, invest in all these other avenues, right? So, and if we wouldn't have taken advantage of getting that house at such, 0% down and having it at a low interest, we wouldn't have been able to do all that.
We wouldn't just continue living in the apartment.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and so that's what one of the things that, most people push back on is like, I have to pay down, this and this and this. Okay. Yeah. If, you have like credit card bills that are from 20 to 30%, yeah, that's definitely something that you want to pay. If you have it at a very low interest, well, we think about that. Like, okay, well, how much is our money going to appreciate in this specific asset class that we can invest in? And are we able to make more that way versus paying down this loan, right? And now, since we're investing in like much bigger asset classes that we're borrowing so much money, and that is great debt. And that's where a lot of the people that make millions and millions of dollars, that's what they do. They leverage this debt. And
Good.
yes, well, and actually it's debt, right? So it's debt. So it could be good or bad, but it's good debt because they're able to get these massive loans and they're able to build whatever type of asset class, and they're going to get more return on their investment by doing that, right? And you have to have that calculated out. You just can't go out there and say, hey, I'm going to purchase this because it's going to make X amount. You have to sit down and actually work the numbers out, right? So you have to have a plan, right? So one of the things that we were talking about earlier before the show, it's, I guess, giving some of our audience, I guess, some homework, right? So if you're doing really well in your job and you enjoy and like your job and you want to have the company grow and you're actually doing what you're saying, right? And you're showing up and you're a really good employee, you have to be true to yourself. Are you a good employee, or are you just barely squeaking by with your employers, right? Are you known to be the hard worker that goes an extra mile, right? I think I'm going to challenge our audience. If you do fit that, I guess, those things, it's go to your employer and ask for a raise, right? But you have to have a plan, right? Say, okay, you have to have a little presentation for them, right? And you can take your slides in there or your paper, but it's, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what I have done. And just like you said, if you're saying and you're doing it and they trust your word, and then this is what I'm going to do for the company, then you present more value to the marketplace. What is your value to the marketplace if you decide to leave? And if you have a plan and you ask for a raise and then you get it, that's great. But what if you don't, right? Are you going to be happy where you're at still? Because if you're not happy already being in that position, what's going to make you $5,000-$10,000 more is not going to make you happy. But having a plan, going in there with a plan, what value you present, and what employers think. This is the way they think, right? It's, okay, I've already paid you for 3 to 5 years or 10 years that you work with us. I've already paid you for that. The raise is for future, right? For future value. It's not for what you've done. For example, some of our bigger friends that they employ hundreds of people, whenever they're paying their employees more, it's not for what they've done, it's what they're going to do and grow for their company, right? So thinking about it that way and saying, the future is going to look like this for this company, and this is what I'm willing to do for this company as the company grows. And because if you're going in there and said, I've already done this for you, I've already done that, I've already done, yeah, you've already done it. you've already gotten paid for it. But what are you willing to do that, or what are you willing to learn or educate or grow with our company in the future? Because we have to continue to grow, right? And again, you have to be true to yourself. And are you willing to grow and learn and educate yourself for yourself, but also for the company?
I was going to say that earlier we talked about the plan, and that's one of the things that Jaime is mentioning. And we are not tone deaf. We understand that there are some economic tough times and that there are some folks that are just trying to figure out how to make it to the next week. And we are very empathetic when it comes to that because we've all been there. I think that what is important, though, is, as Jaime mentioned, that long-term plan. Sometimes it's very difficult, given our current situation, to look past where we are today. But that long-term plan is so necessary because it's a constant reminder that today is not going to last forever. And just being able to be prepared to take advantage of those opportunities when they arise. Jaime also mentioned about coming to your employer and sharing your qualifications, sharing what you've been able to accomplish, but also what you hope to accomplish in the future. And then I think there's also an exit strategy there as well. So that could be a plan B. If they fail to see your value and the value that you bring to their company and everything that you have done so far, then by all means, you owe it to yourself to go out there and look for a place that is going to value your skills. So I think that is part of that plan. And as painful as it may be, because a lot of us are loyal employees, but I think that's also one of those strategies that may keep you middle class if they fail to see your value. So keep that in the back of your mind that yes, it is great that you are looking out for the company and that you are delivering the skills that you set forth your plan to deliver, but also look out for you, look after your family, and make sure that those still align with your personal goals going forward.
Can you believe the hour is already through? Wow.
So we had some people ask about literature or other things that they can read or listen to actually for them to get educated. So if I can kind of chime in first, not one book, not one podcast, not one person changed the way that we're living now, right? And we said it many times before. If you are hanging out with people that don't want to get to where you want to be, you're just not in the right group. And I wish I could name you one or two books that changed the way I thought about money. There's great books out there. We can probably list them on our website on some of the books that we enjoy. But I think the main thing is you have to surround yourself with people that are thinking so much bigger than you are. And that's going to different events, that's hanging out with other people, or asking other people, hey, where are you learning this specific task or knowledge? But it's surrounding yourself with different people, different groups. And that's why we invest a lot on personal development, right? We invest a lot on let me say that again, on personal development, because we know that people that want to get further in life, that want to be more, not just for themselves, but like we mentioned earlier, for the community and to live a legacy and things like that, they're really not hanging out at home. They're hanging out in these master classes, masterminds that want to share their knowledge, that want to talk about money and how to make it grow. A lot of the times too, it's, the people that write books, they might not be as successful, and then you're learning from them. So you want to learn from someone that you want to trade places with almost, right? Would I want to trade places with that specific person that's extremely successful, that's a good person, that helps the community? Yeah. So I want to learn from them. So that's that's a tough question, right? Because I can't sit here and say, hey, go read this book because this book is really going to help you. So it's just about the experience and
Right.
about surrounding yourself with people.
I agree. There's not one specific book, one specific event, one specific person. It's cumulative over time. But I would say specialized knowledge in specific niches is a great area to grow. For example, say for instance, if we specifically wanted to improve on learning how to invest in real estate, then we would follow, volunteer, go to these meetups, learn and focus, laser focus in that particular area. If we find somebody that we know is successful specifically in what we want to accomplish, but they're ahead of us, that's the meaningful relationship and connection and the person we want to hang around. Those are the environments we make sure we want to get around. Same category, like if we want to become better speakers, who is actually in the speaking circuit, who is successfully doing what I already want to do and can specifically learn. And so specialized niches is something that's very important because sometimes maybe somebody is really successful in that lane, but that's not something we want to do, right? Specifically getting into a lane where like, okay, they're successful, maybe they lead a lifestyle. I can still learn golden nuggets from what they can teach. But if you're in specialized lanes and you can focus your energy, whether it's increasing your marketing skills, whether it's increasing your speaking skills, whether it's learning how to invest specifically in a type of, like for us, when we said, okay, we're going to fine tune and focus on multifamily. There's 10 million ways to do real estate, but we're going to fine tune and learn multifamily in and out. Who are the people we want to get to know in that space? And so I think that's a strategy that's helped us along the way, right? When you talk about, well, how do I get into these rooms, right? Find out where these people are. Sometimes they're at local events. You know, you can find a lot of these people in free communities. Sometimes you don't have, you know, there's Eventbrite. You can go into your local area, look up Eventbrite, look up your specialty niche. Most of them have local meetups where you can meet a lot of these people. It's a free event. And so when you're wanting to make connections with people in the space that you want to learn more about, there are free resources and events. There is nothing better than meeting a person in person and getting to know an authentic relationship. And don't have the get mentality, have the give mentality. When you surround yourself, always be a giver. How can you add value? Don't ask them, how do you add value? Just find ways that you can provide and help them, right? They have an event they promote, right? Attend it, promote it for them, right? They're doing a nonprofit. How can I volunteer? You have an event, I'll come to your event, I'll volunteer, I'll do sign-ins. How can you, it doesn't always have to involve money. But if you have time and you want to be surrounded by that person that you look up to, find ways that you can help and be in their circle. That dinner, that conversation, those few minutes, and building a friendship with that will be a worth of like, there's so much, it's collapsed experience and things that you'll learn, but be authentic in that. Don't always think of like, what can I get out of this person? Because people can feel that right off the bat. People can feel if you're a vampire, just trying to suck energy and resources out of them.
Can I pick your brain? It's like, no, that's not really going to work. And most people that are very experienced, they don't really like that. But you can't just pick my brain for an hour. And first of all, I don't even know who you are. What value have you presented to me that I'm willing to you pick my brain on whatever knowledge I have to offer? So and again, it's like value, value, value. Don't expect anything in return. And that's how we actually pretty much abide by. If we really want to know someone truly and honestly, we're going to try to get to know them as much as we can. And as a person, as a family man, or as a family woman, you know, what they enjoy, maybe treating them out for lunch or dinner, or just sending them some flowers or for their birthday or something unfortunate happened, sending them a card, sending them a text. What taught me this is you spend 3 minutes a day and you reach out to as many people as you can that you have talked to, and just 100% about how they're doing, and not asking them anything else. Just, hey, John, I was just thinking about you today. How are you doing? I know that you went to this specific place. How did it go? So just being genuine with yourself. But again, it's value. Don't expect anything in return. And then you get to nurture that relationship. You get to water it. You get to feed it, and it's gonna flourish.
So, guys, we've had so many discussions, and I really want to see if we can wrap up a few things that we discussed. So, y'all help me out as I'm going through and summarizing. We've talked about the importance of taking a look, an honest look at how money was looked at growing up in your household. Because believe it or not, you still carry some of that with you, and you will find yourself either being like me to where you're like, oh, you have to hold on to it because maybe something will happen, or where she's checking the price tag and not buying it unless it's on sale. So I think definitely looking at your money habits growing up, taking a look at what other people that are successful or maybe in a place where you want to be one day, what they're doing. Ed Milet talks about it as a thermostat. He says that those people are like a thermostat. You're either going to rise to their level or you're going to decrease to their level. And you don't really know it because it's so subtle, but it's amazing what happens when you surround yourself with people that have that mindset of growth, that have that mindset of breaking barriers, that have that mindset of being the one that's going to take your family forward. That way, the more that you get, the more that you can absolutely give. Maybe that's to your immediate family, your mom and dad, your aunts and uncles, people that really need it. And you know what? You're going to be that thermostat for them because you're going to show them that it is indeed possible because they may have grown up the way that you have. So we talked about that. We talked about the importance of budgeting and also not turning a blind eye at, let's not look at that interest rate in that credit card because it might just be too high. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. We talked about the topic of continuous learning. Yes, we love books like Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, right, with Sharon Lecter. We love those kinds of things. We love the cash flow game. We love those things that kind of help you get out of that mindset because it wasn't taught to us. You're absolutely right. We didn't learn this in school. We didn't learn this from our parents, and it's taboo to talk about. A lot of people don't go to lunch with their normal crowd and talk about finances. It's one of those things that it's frowned upon. But it's not frowned upon in the wealthy community. So let's break out of that and let's figure out, what did you do to get where you are? What do I need to do to break out of my budget? Maybe it's one of those things. How many subscriptions do you have and what was the last time that you looked at it? That's another way to increase that wedge that Dr. Wall was talking about on that expendable income. Take a look at strategies that you may not have employed in the past. For example, the not paying off an interest rate that's 0 or 2% so that you can leverage that income on doing something else that maybe you want to do. What else have I missed?
Unlearn.
Unlearn, deprogram your mind. Those things that you think are true are not necessarily true. One of the stories that we didn't touch on is Dr. Jaime, when he was little, he would actually plant money in the ground and let yes, his mother has shared that story. And guys, it's working. Money does grow on trees. I'd like to go dig that money tree up at some point. But for me, I wanted to save the best for last for me because you know that I am a faith person and I believe in God and I believe that God can do more with the 10% that I can give him than I can do with 100%. That's one of those things that you may choose to look into. You may choose to just growing up, my dad would give, and this is a funny story, but he would do this. When the church plate was coming across, he would put a 20 out and he'd take 15 back. That wasn't necessarily 10%. It was he was giving what he could give. And I thought that was normal. You couldn't make change out of the offering bucket, but apparently you can't. So that is something that for me, we strive to do. Some days it's easier than others, and some days we give to charities. I love personally, I have a few charities that I give to, and then just those speak to your heart. We talked about superpowers. I think the easiest way to be authentic is to really look at your God-given gifts and abilities and see how you can use those to serve others. You may not get paid for them now, but I guarantee you that there is a way to monetize that, and maybe that's your side hustle. There's a beautiful quote that says to use your weekend to build the life that you want instead of trying to escape the one that you have.
I love that.
Isn't that cool? And it's so true because a lot of us are like, can't wait till Friday. For us, every day is Friday. Every day that you wake up and then you're able to breathe in that fresh air and to wiggle your fingers and wiggle your toes. You know that some people didn't wake up today. Some people cannot do that today. And so if you can change your mindset and you can train your mind to look at the things that are bigger than yourselves. That money situation was created by man and it can be fixed by man. But guys, There are so many different strategies, and we encourage you to look at them. Turn over every leaf until you find the one that works for you.
That's a fantastic summary, by the way. I told you were like
You see?
so. No, and then we'll have some guests, future guests on the show that they can teach us some of their strategies that how they have been successful. And everyone's different. So you might think that our podcast was full of crap, right?
And that's okay.
And that's okay. But if you're able to say take one or two nuggets that you completely disagree with and maybe start doing a little bit of research on it that interests you, and then maybe you can even be much better and be more successful than us going forward. And then you can pass it down to your loved ones, your friends and family, and maybe even host meetups and things like that on your successes, right? Because if you're successful, you want to pass it down to other people, right? And that's what we're very passionate about. So yeah, we're made good money and stuff like that, but again, what else are we doing to make this world a better place and community, right? So we just want to help as many people as we want to see their superpower, right? And so they can live a happy life with everyone that they're surrounded with, right? But thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the wrap up. And thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Live and Give. And remember, every Monday at 11 o'clock, we would love for you to join us. We rotate topics. You'll never know what we're going to be talking about.
We're going to have a wheel to the.
But we want to keep it as raw and real and just share from our own experiences in any way that we can. Just share any golden nuggets, whether you are alignment, whether some of it, even if you're like you said, open mind, whatever fits your bucket. If it moves, we just want to help move the needle forward. But the more that you give, it doesn't even matter. You'd be surprised what faith and giving can do. Maria touched on faith and talking about giving. The smallest amount that you can give, that whether it's monetary, whether it's your time, when you give, it does something to your heart and your ability to receive. And it's, trust me, your ROI is beyond anything that you can ever give. It has to truly come from your heart and it feeds your soul. And I encourage you, because I saw this at a young age with my parents, with nothing, almost financially nothing, but they were such givers and so beautiful. And so I always believe in the power of giving. But thank you for joining us. And until next time, bye everyone.